Morning. Good to be here. It's been a little bit. Last time I was here was Easter. I forgot it was Easter. Oops. But now I'm here back again, and hopefully I'll be here at least one more time before Nick comes in and takes over and helps you all out. I told you so. What a wonderful phrase, isn't it? Have you ever heard that from anyone before by chance? Maybe, probably someone in this very room, right? Whether it's your parents back when you were young, or your children now that you're a little older, maybe it was your spouse or younger sibling. I was a younger sibling. I hit my older siblings with it. They didn't like it very much. Nobody likes this phrase. I told you so. And yet, how often is it that we put ourselves in situations where we know better, and then we do the unintelligent or the foolish or the straight up sinful thing anyway? I know that it was tax season recently, and we owe a lot of money to the government. And well, you found that little workaround that you can hide a little bit of what you had, and then the government probably won't notice. Guess what? They do. And then they come back around a few months later whenever they get to it, and now you're in trouble. You know what? I told you so. You knew better. Why did you do that? I know that you shouldn't have lied on your tests to pass your classes to get to the next grade level. Well, now you're in the next grade level and you don't know what you're doing because you cheated your way up. You knew better. Why would you do that? You know, one nation that runs into this a lot is the nation of Israel, who have been told better time and time again, and yet they just don't get it. You knew better, Israel. And today we'll look at a tale of two countries, as I've titled it. My formatting is a little bit messed up on the slide, but you'll get over it. Israel and our ongoing relations in Egypt. One of these instances of God and Jeremiah literally saying, I told you so, happens in Jeremiah 42 and in Jeremiah 43. Go ahead and be turning over there. This should really all be this should really all be the chapter of Jeremiah 42. 42 in verse 1 through 43 in verse 7. Really, they're one chapter. It's a bad chapter division. But we'll look at this story today, because this is Israel clearly knowing better, clearly knowing the right thing to do, and then they appeal to God to support their decision to do the wrong thing. God says no, and Israel does it anyway. God says, I told you not to. Why did you just do that? Well, today we'll walk through this process. Firstly, we have to ask, how did this process go? Secondly, why does it go so badly? And then thirdly, ultimately, what does it mean for us who are a couple of thousand years removed from their situation? Are you in Jeremiah 42? Let's start reading in verse 1. Then all of the commanders of the armies, along with Johanan, the son of Kareah, and Jezaniah, the son of Hoshaiah, and all of the people, from the least to the greatest, approached the prophet Jeremiah and said, May our petition come before you. Pray to the Lord your God on our behalf, on behalf of this entire remnant, for few of us remain out of the many, as you can see with your own eyes. Pray that the Lord your God may tell us the way we should go and the thing that we should do. So the prophet Jeremiah said to them, I have heard. I will now pray to the Lord your God according to your words, and I will tell you every word that the Lord answers you. I will not withhold a word from you. And they said to Jeremiah, May the Lord be a faithful and a true witness against us if we don't act according to every word that the Lord your God sends you to tell us. Whether it is pleasant or unpleasant, we will obey the Lord our God, to whom we are sending you, so that it may go well with us. We will certainly obey the Lord our God. There's the Israelites' promise. They know what's good. They know what's right. There's their promise. Pick up in verse 7. Now at the end of 10 days, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, and he summoned Johanan, the son of Kareah, and all the commanders of the armies who were with him, and all the people from the least to the greatest. And Jeremiah said to them, This is what the Lord says. The God of Israel, to whom you sent me to bring your petition before him, if you will indeed stay in this land, the land of Israel, then I will rebuild and not demolish you. And I will plant and not uproot you, because I relent concerning the disaster that I have brought on you. Don't be afraid of the king of Babylon, whom you now fear. Don't be afraid of him. This is the Lord's declaration. I am with you to save you and rescue you from him. I will grant you compassion. He will have compassion on you and allow you to return to your own soil. But if you say, we will not stay in this land, in order to disobey the Lord your God, and if you say, no, instead we'll go to the land of Egypt, where we will not see war, nor hear the sound of the ram's horn, or hunger for food, and will live there, then hear the word of the Lord, you remnants of Judah. This is what the Lord of armies, the God of Israel, says. If you are firmly resolved to go to Egypt and to stay there for a while, then the sword you fear will overtake you even in the land of Egypt. And the famine you are worried about will follow on your heels there to Egypt, and you will die there. All who resolve to go to Egypt to stay there for a while will die by the sword, or famine, or plague, and they will have no survivor, nor fugitive from the disaster I will bring upon them. For this is what the Lord of armies, the God of Israel, says, just as my anger and fury were poured out on Jerusalem's residents, so will my fury pour out on you if you go to Egypt. You will become an example for cursing, scorn, execration, and disgrace, and you will never see this place again. That's God's answer. Jeremiah adds on a little bit at the end here, verse 19. The Lord has spoken concerning you, you remnant of Judah. Don't go to Egypt. Know for certain that I have warned you today. I told you so, right? You know what to do. Know for certain that I have warned you today. You have gone astray at the cost of your lives, because you are the ones who sent me to the Lord your God, saying, pray to the Lord our God on our behalf. And as for all that the Lord our God says, tell it to us, and we'll act accordingly. For I have told you today, but you have not obeyed the Lord your God, and everything he has sent me to tell you. Now therefore know for certain that by the sword and famine and plague you will die in the place where you desired to go to stay for a while. And when Jeremiah had finished speaking to the people all the words of the Lord their God, all these words that the Lord their God had sent him to give them, then Azariah and Johanan and all the other arrogant men responded to Jeremiah, you are speaking a lie. The Lord our God has not sent you to say, you must not go to Egypt to stay there for a while. Rather, Baruch is inciting you against us to hand us over to the Chaldeans, to put us to death, or to deport us into Babylon. And so Johanan and the commanders of the armies and all the people failed to obey the Lord's command to stay in the land of Judah, and instead, verses 5, 6, and 7, they pack everyone up and they move out. You know what happens in the second half of chapter 43? Verses 8 through 13, God prophesies destruction against them. And it comes to pass a couple of years later. They know better, and yet they do the wrong thing. Well, why does this go so badly? And what does it all mean for us? We can break this chapter, or these couple of chapters, if you want to think about it, we can break it down into 5 different actions that Israel takes part of, right? So the first 3 verses in chapter 42 are the action of Israel going out and asking God. All of you start with A, by the way, so hopefully that was helpful for you to remember. We start out with Israel asking God, hey, God, is this a good idea? Can we go to Egypt? Is this something you approve of? Is this something you're willing to sponsor us to do, right? They ask a question. Well, secondly, then they have to assure Jeremiah that everything's going to be okay. Because Jeremiah's been going for 42 chapters at this point, 42 chapters, 41 years, and 0 conversions. That's not a very good rate, right? Is Israel actually going to listen this time? Well, yes, of course, Jeremiah, of course we're going to listen. And so verses 5 and verses 6, verses 5 and 6, that little response they have there, yes, we will do exactly what the Lord our God says. We'll certainly obey the Lord our God. Twice over, it's there. We will definitely obey. There's your assurance. And then there's a period of nothing. 10 days. This is the most important part of the whole chapter, by the way, and it's summed up in 1 verse, and we'll get to it in a few minutes. Anticipation. Anticipating an answer, a response, some kind of communication from God. This all happens in verse 7 with a little phrase at the end of 10 days. That's so important. They anticipate the answer, the favorable answer from God telling them they can go to Egypt. And then they get to assess the answer, the negative answer from God telling them they should not. Well, wait a second. That's not exactly what we asked for, but God gives two assurances, the assurance of peace and the assurance of punishment. Peace in Israel, punishment in Egypt. Which one do you want? Well, let's go ahead and avoid the truth. Let's go ahead and avoid what God wants. Let's go ahead and do our own thing because we have our plan and we're going to accomplish it. And even though we know the right thing to do and the smart thing to do and the good thing to do, we're going to ignore it and do something else and walk away from the Lord our God. Does that ever describe something in your life? You know better, you ask about something. Yes, yeah, I'm actually going to do the smart thing in this case, except when I'm told not to, and then, well, I really wanted to. Let's look at this play out for Israel. We're going to go through this list again, one by one, piece by piece, and then, well, as we walk through the story, hopefully you're able to draw some application to yourself. So we start with their asking. In verses 1 through 3, Israel has a question. Israel has a request for Jeremiah and ultimately for God. Ask God what we should do, Jeremiah. We're in trouble and we need your help. Well, what has happened in Israel to make Israel want to rely on God and to ask him a question? We're kind of cutting 42 chapters in, but if you back up 3 chapters to chapter 39, you find a situation in which the king Zedekiah is, he was unfaithful to God, and Jerusalem gets overrun by Babylon. Zedekiah runs out of the city by night trying to escape, and his sons get killed and his eyes get put out, and he gets carted off to Babylon. Jerusalem has fallen, and now they've got a replacement king, another governor appointed by Babylon. His name is Gedaliah. But this guy named Ishmael in chapter 41 comes in and kills him. And now look at chapter 41. In verses 17 and 18, this will sum up the story up to this point. Israel left, stopping in Geruth Chimham, which is near Bethlehem, in order to make their way to Egypt, away from the Chaldeans or the Babylonians, because they feared Babylon, because Ishmael had struck down Gedaliah, whom the king of Babylon had appointed. Wait a second, a foreign ruler has conquered us, a foreign ruler has appointed his little servant to help run our city. We've accidentally killed his servant. That's not very good for us. And now Babylon's going to come after us. We run away near Bethlehem. We run away to Egypt. But wait, let's ask God if he will approve. Now, it's good of them to ask. But do you really think that God is going to support Israel going back to Egypt? I seem to remember he had a pretty vested interest in bringing them out of Egypt in the first place. No, of course, God's not going to approve of that, and yet they ask anyway. They want it to be true. They want him to, and maybe in the extenuating circumstances, it will end up being so. Well, Jeremiah responds back with his own assurance in verse 4. Jeremiah speaks up and says, I have heard you. And then he makes 3 assurances of his own. I will now pray to the Lord your God concerning what you ask me to. I will tell you every word that the Lord answers. I will not tell you any of the words that God says. I think I said that right. I will definitely tell you it. I will not withhold anything. Jeremiah's been doing this for 41 chapters already, and they know it. He's been doing it for the past 40 years already, and they already know it. But Jeremiah gives his own assurance. Yes, I will tell you everything. Yes, I will let you know what God says. But 41 chapters in, nobody's listened. Will they really listen this time? Oh, yes, they will, because they always listen, don't they? Because they're very well aware of what's right and what's wrong, and they always choose the right option. That's the wonderful thing about the nation of Israel. All the way from Exodus to Malachi, there are 0 problems, except for every single book, all along the way. We have no problems except we hate Moses and we turn against him. We have no problems except we fall into idolatry and have to go through the judges period. We have no problems except now we want a king. We have no problems except we hate that king. We have no problems except idolatry and rampant wickedness so bad that God has to destroy the entire nation. But we'll do it right this time. That's your assurance, Jeremiah. Yes, we'll listen this time. Jeremiah says, fine, God's word is coming. Unfiltered, very raw. I'm going to give you the words straight from God's mouth, and it's your responsibility to obey them. Do you see Israel's response in verses 5 and 6? Do they understand the gravity of what they're doing? Kind of. Yeah. Look at verse 5. May the Lord be a true and faithful witness against us if we don't act according to every word that he says. Right? May God testify against us in court. May God bring his witness against us. May God get rid of us, essentially, if we aren't obedient to everything that he says. If we're not obeying God, it's going to go badly. That's what they're promising. You see verse 6 as well. Whether it is pleasant or unpleasant, we will obey the Lord our God, to whom we are sending you, so that it may go well with us. In verse 5, if we don't obey God, it's going to go badly. In verse 6, if we do obey God, it's going to go well. Oh, they know. And yet, when the answer comes, they're going to reject it anyway. And that's unfortunate, because you have this period in the middle where they should really take some time and think. We read over this in verse 7 because it's just a short little verse where nothing really happens, and it's summed up as, at the end of 10 days, the word of the Lord came. And we want to talk about Israel before, and we want to talk about Israel after, but what about Israel during? What about those 10 days? Why is there a break of 10 days in the first place? Why is there a gap there? We don't have the information. It's just not given. It just says it's been 10 days. But think about it from God's perspective. Think about it from Jeremiah's perspective. Think about it from Israel's perspective. Let's go through those three. Why would God want 10 days in between everything? Did you know that God is not beholden to man's scheduling? Israel says, we want an answer, we want it now, because we want to move and we want to go. And God says, I'll think about it. And the next day, still thinking about it. And he just goes. And you wait a week and there's nothing. And you wait another half a week and finally something. And he just takes some time. If God were reliant on Israel, he would not be around anymore, because Israel was totally unreliable. But the fact is, God does not rely on mankind. Mankind relies on God. Here are 10 days. You get to think about your situation. You get some time to cool off. You get some time to consider, I'm not on your schedule, you're on mine. I don't answer to you, you answer to me. So Israel, when you make your decision at the end of 10 days, keep in mind who you're listening to. Keep in mind who you're waiting for. This is a power move by God. 10 days, Israel sits in the same location. And they get to think and realize exactly who they're making a request of. Not someone they have power over. This person, this God, has power over them. Put yourself in Jeremiah's shoes. You ask God once on the first day, the Israelites come by, have a 2-minute conversation. Hey, ask God this for us. Jeremiah says, okay. Israel walks away. Jeremiah asks, and he asks again, and he asks again, continually through these 10 days. I assume it's not just once. I assume it's many, many times. God, what is the answer? Should I tell them yes or no? But think about Jeremiah's perspective. He's been at this for 40 chapters of the book already, covering 41 years of time. I did that math this morning. I think I did it right. From 627 BC, the 13th year of King Josiah, that's Jeremiah 1 verse 1, until here post Zedekiah, which is 586 or after. 41 years, 40 chapters, consistent preaching, always faithful, always the word of the Lord delivered to these people. And it's always been the same people. And there's always been no reaction. except to ignore him. He thinks back to Jeremiah 38 in verses 14 through 16, I believe it is, when he talks to King Zedekiah. And King Zedekiah calls Jeremiah to him, and he says, I'm really afraid of what Babylon's going to do, and I really want to find somewhere to run to, and can you ask the Lord what I should do in this situation? The message, stay put, God's got you, it's going to be all right if you stay in the land, and if you stay faithful to the Lord your God. Zedekiah hears it, but he's afraid of Babylon, and he runs away anyway. And now you've got Israel, who's afraid of Babylon, who's coming to Jeremiah, and they're saying, we really want to go away somewhere. We really want to go to Egypt. Can we please get out of here? It's the same situation. Is there really going to be a different response this time? I don't know. 10 days of that. Jeremiah sweating over it, trying to get an answer from God to find out if these people will actually listen or not. But Israel gets 10 days too. And Israel gets 10 days. They were so afraid, and they were all running, and they were all scattering from before the Babylonians. And then God says, stay in place, stay put for a week and a half. And they get 10 days to realize Babylon's not coming after them immediately. And, now we don't have to make a rash decision. And your emotions start cooling off. And you start to get a little bit calmer and more in your right mind. And now it's not just a rash decision made from the heart. Oh, we got to go here. Now it's going to be a logical one because you have time and you have space and you've been able to think about it. God gives them 10 days to think about it. Do you know what else Israel has? It's back in chapter 41 in verse 17. We read over it. I don't know if you noticed it or not, because I didn't the first time I read it. Jeremiah 41 and verse 17, Israel leaves and they stop in Geruth Shimham. I don't know where that is. Why does Jeremiah care enough to tell us? Well, what else does he say? It's near to Bethlehem. Now, that really wouldn't matter normally, but then you think about it. And Israel is settled in a place where Bethlehem is just over the hill. Is Bethlehem important? No, it's not, right? Micah 5 and verse 2, as for you, Bethlehem and Ephrathah, too little to be counted among the clans of Judah. Well, Micah 100 years ago, he was talking about it. He said Bethlehem's not important. Wait a second. What does the rest of that verse say? From you will come a ruler whose beginnings are from long ago and who echoes forward to eternity. Is Bethlehem important? It's just a little town over the next hill, and yet over the horizon you can see God's eternal king is coming from this city. You're in the vicinity. You're right next to it. It's like, I don't know, there's a Messiah coming from San Jose. We're in driving distance. We're right here. We're local. Hey, maybe you shouldn't walk away from God's king. Maybe you should stay and wait for God's promises. Because if God has promised his eternal king is coming from this location, I don't know, he's probably going to come from that location. I think that's a pretty good bet. God has them parked 10 minutes walk from Bethlehem, his promised city, the city of David, the one where you can look and you can see God's promises being fulfilled. And he says, just wait there. Israel has 10 days. Standing here, it's right there. God's promises, we can almost touch them. We can see them. We know they're coming. You have 10 days to think. And you calm down and you stop being rash and you look at God's king and you say, okay, and now it's time to make that decision. They have all the tools. They know the right answer in verses 5 and 6. If we listen, that's good. If we don't listen, that's bad. God has promised his land is amazing and his king is coming and everything's going to be great here. We know that that is true. And then the assessment comes. And what is it? It's the natural promise. It's the usual thing. It's what's always been true. It is, you should stay in the land and you should not leave it. In verses 7 and 8, in verse 8 and 9, rather, you get this little introduction where Jeremiah summons everyone, but he doesn't just summon this Yohanan guy. He doesn't just summon the couple of other ringleaders and all the commanders. He summons Yohanan and all the commanders and all the people from the least to the greatest. Everyone has an opportunity to make this choice and to weigh this decision. You know what's right, you know what's wrong. You all have equal bearing and choice in this decision that's coming about. And Jeremiah gives them two options: peace, verses 10, 11, 12, or punishment, verses 13 through 22. Those are your two choices. God says, don't go to Egypt and don't fear Babylon, and God will be with you if you stay. If you show the faith to stay, God will restore you to this land that you're at. But on the other hand, if you don't, and listen to the language in verse 13 and 14, what does God know is going to happen? But if you instead say, oh, we won't stay in this land, in order to disobey the Lord your God. And if you say, no, instead we'll go to the land of Egypt, where we won't see war or hunger or famine or whatever it is, then hear this. He knows exactly what's going to be said here. God gives you the option of peace or punishment. Jeremiah chimes in on his end with his own 2 cents at the last moment. In verses 19, 20, 21, 22, the Lord has told you, don't go to Egypt. Know for certain that I have warned you today. But you have gone astray. In verse 20. Verse 21, I have told you today. But you have not obeyed the Lord your God. In verse 22, therefore know for certain that destruction and punishment is coming. It's not a hopeless conclusion that they might turn around and be faithful, but they haven't for the past 40 years, and for the 40 years before that, and before that, and before that. And God has spoken to them time and time again through Jeremiah and Isaiah and all of those other minor prophets that came before. And God has already tried communicating, and it's probably not going to work. And now these people are set on Egypt, and God can see their hearts. Well, you shouldn't do this. But if you do, know what's coming. That's God's assessment. What's yours, Israel? Which one are you going to choose? You know what's good, you know what's bad, you know what's right, you know what's wrong. You know what's going to work well for you and allow you to live in comfort, and you know what's not, and you know what's not. Because why would we listen to the Lord our God when he tells us something that we don't want to listen to? And so instead, in this last section, you see the response of Israel. It's ring-led, it's headed up by Yohanan and all of these other arrogant men in verse 2. But in verse 4, you see that all the people failed to obey the Lord's command. The bad leadership drags them away, but it's also their own fault. They got the chance to assess, they got the chance to answer, and they all choose to ignore it. And instead, you get such tight lines like verse 2, oh, Jeremiah, you're a liar. Verse 3, oh, Baruch actually just hates us and wants us to die and be deported, probably in that order, because he's just terrible like that. You know, there's no answer to the argument. There's no correction to what God said. It's just personal attacks on the people who are delivering the message, and then they ignore it and make their own choices. Israel is afraid of man. Afraid of what Babylon is going to do to them, more afraid of Babylon than they are of God. And God lets them walk away to their own punishments and to their own destruction, because they walk away from the blessings of God and from the land of God and from the protection of God, and they willingly choose to walk out of it. So now they're not blessed or protected, and they don't have a land. That's the choice that they made, even though they know better. Their fear of man has encouraged them to the point where they shun the will of God to become like the men and the nations around. And that doesn't go so well for us. You know what? I told you so. You knew better. Shouldn't have done that. You were so well aware. You assured me and everything. You told me all the right things. You said all the right words. Did you even believe them? Did you listen to yourself? You knew better. Why would you do that? Can you relate to something like that? You know better. I really shouldn't lie in this situation. I really shouldn't steal that money. I really shouldn't do whatever action it is that you find yourself caught up in. And then you do it anyway, even though God's told you not to, even though your parents told you not to, even though your spouse recommended against it and your best friends advised, that's probably not a good idea. Maybe it's not always a sin. Maybe it's sometimes just foolishness, just a silly thing that really you shouldn't have done. And now you look back on it and you say, well, was it really worth doing that? What's the problem? There are multiple problems here. I think we can all probably agree on that. There are multiple reasons why Israel would walk away. And so maybe we blame it on the bad leadership. Maybe we blame it on the parents who didn't teach their children well. Maybe we blame it on all sorts of different things, their natural bias against God and their problem with idolatry. And we can blame it against all kinds of things. But what's the core, the root problem? I'd be interested in what your answers are afterwards. But you know what the root problem is, at least in my opinion? The one that I see that gets reflected throughout the whole chapter over and over and over again. Look back at chapter 42. Let's read verses 1 through 6, because it's seen very clearly here. Try to pick up on it. What's getting repeated? What keeps coming up? Chapter 42, starting in verse 1. All the commanders of the armies, along with Johanan and Yezaniah, and all the people from the least to the greatest, approached the prophet Jeremiah, and they said, "May our petition come before you. Pray to the Lord your God on behalf of this entire remnant, for few of us remain out of the many, as you can see with your own eyes, that the Lord your God may tell us the way we should go and the thing we should do." So the prophet Jeremiah said to them, "I have heard. I will now pray to the Lord your God according to your words, and I will tell you every word that the Lord answers you. I will not withhold a word from you." And they said to Jeremiah, "May the Lord be a true and faithful witness against us if we don't act according to every word the Lord your God sends you to tell us. Whether it is pleasant or unpleasant, we will obey the Lord our God, to whom we are sending you, so that it may go well with us. We will certainly obey the Lord our God." Do you see it? What are they repeating over and over and over again? Look at verse 2. "May our petition come before you, Jeremiah, pray to the Lord your God on our behalf." Is God their God? No, Jeremiah, you pray to the Lord your God. Jeremiah answers that, and they repeat it again in verse 3, that the Lord your God might tell us the way we should go. Jeremiah answers in verse 4, well, I'll pray to the Lord your God. He's your God too. You answer to him as well. He's not just mine, he's also yours. I'll pray to the Lord your God. And what do they say in verse 5? May the Lord be a true and faithful witness if we don't act according to every word that the Lord your God sends us. Well, verse 6, we'll obey the Lord our God. Well, in verse 6, we'll certainly obey the Lord our God. But when it comes down to it, who do they obey? They don't obey the Lord, the God of everything. They don't obey the Lord, the God of heaven and earth. They obey their Lord and their God that they have set up in their own hearts. You see this repeated throughout the chapter. Maybe it's in verses 2 through 6 over and over and over again. Maybe it's in verse 9 when Jeremiah says, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says." Guess what? He's your God too. Maybe it's in verse 13. If you say, "We won't stay in this land in order to disobey the Lord your God." In verse 15, "Hear the word of the Lord, you remnant of Judah. This is what the Lord of armies, the God of Israel, says. He is your God." In verse 18, "This is what the Lord of armies, the God of Israel, says. He's your God, Israel. Maybe you should listen." In verse 20, "You've gone astray at the cost of your lives because you were the ones who sent me to the Lord your God." He's your God too. He's not mine. He doesn't belong to me. No, he's the God of everything. He's the God of you people as well. And in verse 21, I have told you today, but you have not obeyed the Lord your God. It gets down. It's so sad and even pitiful when you get to 43, chapter 43, verse 1. When Jeremiah had finished speaking to all the people, all the words of the Lord their God, all these words that the Lord their God had sent him to give them, you see that it's this futile attempt. He's the Lord your God too. But in verse 40, in chapter 43 and verse 2, it's so telling their answer. You were speaking a lie. The Lord our God has not sent you to say that. The God that we have in our hearts, he hasn't sent you to disagree with us. The God that we glorify and that we pray to and that we are asking for permission, well, he wouldn't go against us. Because guess what? He is them. They are their own God. They ignore the Lord, the God of heaven. They call it someone else's God. They push it off on somebody else. And Jeremiah, you can pray for him for us. Why not pray for him yourself? Why not go to God yourself? Why go through a third party? Jeremiah, you pray to the Lord your God, but when the Lord your God answers, we'll ignore him because we're listening to a Lord who is our God, who is none other than doing whatever we want to do in whatever way we want to do it. However, we say it should be done when we want it to happen. And God lets them go and follow their own hearts, to follow their own God. And he walks away and he lets them destroy themselves. When you look at your life and you consider the things that you know it's right to do this, you know it's wrong to do this. You know you should do this and it's godly over here and this is the other option and this is bad, but I really want to do this. Are we any better than saying, oh, he's the Lord, your God? I know that your God would tell you to refrain from that action, but mine allows me to so. And he is merciful because he'll let me walk into sin and then I can always repent and come back up. Is there a question in your heart, the Lord, their God versus my God versus his or hers or whoever's? Guess what? Shouldn't be. There is the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, the God who created, and the God who is. And there's your response to him. And you can listen, or you cannot. And that's your choice. But God does not approve of you walking away. There's no such thing as my God or your God or his or hers or whoever's. There is the God, and there's your answer. Which one are you? Do you want the peace of God or the punishment? Do you want the goodness of God or the not goodness of walking away? That one wasn't very smooth. Do you want to be the people of God? Do you want to be the people of the world? Do you want to live in Israel, the land of God, seeing his promises and living under his blessings? Or do you want to do your own thing? It's your choice. You get to make it. But you know the right one to make. If there's any help we can be, if there's a change you need to make, if there's any way we can be of service to you, then I'll be right here if I'm helpful as we're standing and singing this song.